Hello and welcome to No Particular Order, Mana Biscuits weekly top 5 list shows where we list our top 5 whatevers in no particular order. This week, top 5 sci-fi and fantasy novels. Okay, so this week we're going to get right into our lists as usual here. Again, they're the top 5 sci-fi and fantasy novels. Only stipulation is that we have read them. So if there's something amazing on the list and it's not on our list, it's either A, we forgot about it, or B, we never read it. But we'll get right into it here. So Jacob, you're up first through my random selection order.
Random selection process. Now, some of these have been a minute since I've read, so I may completely miss things or in regards to some of the story.
Quit making excuses and get into it.
All right, first one on my list is Good Kind's Wizard's First Rule. All of mine are going to be series, actually. And this particular series ended this year with a total of 15 books.
Didn't it end at Confessor?
No, it ends at
Warband.
Yep, ends at 15 books. And
as far as I'm concerned, it ended after 5 books, because that's when I stopped reading it.
Yeah, that's when a lot of people stopped reading it. I've continued, and I honestly have to say it's better towards the end. I mean, it picks back up, but yeah, it can be, and it is.
It could be better because it's hard to be worse than book 5. So.
Oh my goodness. God, just so bad.
Wow, you guys are
this
terrible.
Soapboxing where all of a sudden, like, Richard Rahl is just like, hey, let me tell you about these things that pertain to real life politics. Also, I swear to God, if I ever read the phrase, "You're a rare person, Richard Rahl," again in my life, I'm going to stab somebody to death. Anyway, continue with your
A man chooses, a slave obeys. Anyway.
Yes. Oh, goodness. All right, next up on the list is the Gunslinger series. It's, again, it's standard issue literature that
Favorite book out of the series?
Drawing of the Three.
Okay.
Do you have a favorite book in this series, RJ?
No, actually, funny story about that. I started reading the series, got really into it, left the book in a minivan, and I forget whose minivan it was, but they left the windows down in the rain, absolutely destroyed the book, and I was really ticked off that they didn't replace it for me, so I, out of principle, never bought it myself. And yeah, now it's been 15 years, so no, I haven't read the series.
What book did you hit? Were you on the first one still?
The very first one, yes.
Okay. See, I read them all. I wish I hadn't. The first four books were astonishingly good, and then after that, I kind of wish he hadn't lived through that getting hit.
That's a little bit harsh.
Well, like,
I mean, for God's sake.
I love Stephen King, and he will be represented on my list. Okay. I just have a lot of hate for those last 3 books.
Okay.
What about, like, The Wind Through the Keyhole and...
Wind Through the Keyhole was okay.
I really enjoyed
Song
that
of Susanna was bad. So was Wolves of the Kala. Bad. And so was The Dark Tower. Bad. Except for the very ending. The very ending. With that everybody else freaked out about it. They're like, oh, it was so terrible. I'm like, no, that was perfect. Like, that was great. But, like, no, it did not live up. It did not live up. When he started pulling in, like, Harry Potter references, like, Dr. Doom is on an electric pony and he's throwing a snitch. And I'm like, ah! And then he goes and he meets with himself. And I'm like, no. It takes a real fine author to do that and not be just, like, indulgent. And he was not that author. Anyway, keep going.
All right, to continue. All right, so we move on to... I had to put Pratchett on here, and I was torn in regards to what I was going to put on, but ultimately I picked the Night Watch from the Discworld series. Again, there were so many books to choose from, and so many of them outstanding, but Night Watch is a personal favorite. Next up is Eye of the World. Again, the start of an epic storyline that kind of, you guys have the Wizard's First Rule thing. For me, the Eye of the World started to teeter there at the fifth and sixth book area.
Ooh.
And then, it did pick back up, and all in all, I was happy with how it ended. So
Okay.
I was done. And lastly is one that you guys have never read, and it's been a long time since I've read, but that's the Rhapsody series. It was recommended by a friend of mine, and as I went through it, strong female character, that she does what is it? It's like botany and music or something like that, and has gifts for both, and it's the story of her. Wow, it's been a minute. Yeah, I'm not going to give anything away on that. And if I
Because you
did, it might
can't.
be
Yeah,
incorrect.
right.
Yes. So, exactly. It might be. Yeah. All right. So that's my top five.
All right. Next up, well, I just realized I had to reboot before we started here, so my list isn't up. So, TJ, you're
Oh.
randomly selected for number 2.
Hooray! I'm going to start off with The Shadow Rising, which is also from the Wheel of Time, because I picked my favorite one out of them. I disagree that they fell off around book 5. I think they fell off around book 8. But I
Maybe it
know a lot
wasn't
of
that high, but
people that do acknowledge that it did kind of diminish for a minute and then get better. Uh, I don't think that any of the books are bad, especially now when I can read through them all in one solid go instead of having to wait like 3 years in between, which is still, looking back on it now, I'm like, man, I cannot believe I got so upset about the 3 year wait between those books when I'm like waiting for like Martin and Rothfuss.
Right.
So yeah, that's number one. The Wheel of Time. Well, the first that I'm naming at least, because obviously these are in no particular order. The next one is The Name of the Wind, the first of the Kingkiller Chronicles by Pat Rothfuss. One of my absolute favorite books. I've read that almost as many times as I've read the books in The Wheel of Time. And I read The Wheel of Time over again each time a new book came out after like the 7th book. And it went to like 15.
Yeah.
So I've read those books a lot. Uh, just a really, really, really solid and very skilled piece of work. Everything is perfectly crafted. Nothing is done on accident. Unless, of course, the 3rd book eventually comes out and he proves me entirely wrong, and I'm hoping that's not
All
the
right.
case.
Real quick, Jay, what is
yes.
so damn important?
But yeah, important text. I apologize.
Okay.
Uh,
All right. Put yourself in do not disturb, my friend. Be a professional, for God's sake.
I
Yeah,
do,
seriously, brah.
All right. Okay, continue with your list, TJ.
The next one, which is going to spark some discussion in our main show. So tune in, or if you haven't tuned in yet, go back and watch it, because we're going to discuss this more at length. Is
Wibbly
Ender's
wobbly.
Game by Orson Scott Card.
Yeah.
It is a fantastic novel. It is a really indicative of how good the genre can be style of book. And even though I know a lot of people that didn't like the follow-up novels, I really did. I think that he did some really interesting stuff with exploring the characters, exploring what it would be like in that kind of a sci-fi future, and also, in a horribly paradoxical sort of way, wrote these fantastic books about acceptance of other people, about what it is to be a person, and how broad the definition has to be for that. And it's just so difficult for me to reconcile that a man who wrote such moving books about acceptance can be so set against acceptance in real life.
Yarp.
But we'll talk.
We'll deep dive that one. Yeah.
The next book on my list is sort of a placeholdery book. It's American Gods by Neil Gaiman, which is basically just me selecting a book that I particularly enjoyed from an author that I darn near worship. And so I could have pretty much put anything he ever wrote on this list. with the exception of perhaps Neverwhere. That wasn't his finest effort. but
was
but
all
American
right.
Gods, yeah, it was still all right. His worst book is better than like
Yeah.
the vast
Well,
majority of books
I mean,
out there.
even the little BBC series they did
Yeah,
spin off that was pretty good too. So
Actually, that was pretty good.
yeah,
the recent TV one or the radio one.
the TV one.
Yeah, I'm thinking the TV
Television
one. I didn't know there was a radio one.
Well, it started out as a radio show
Yeah.
that he novelized,
I
and
mean,
then
pretty much if it's on the BBC, you can assume it was a radio play at some point. That's just how they operate over there. But anyway.
But yeah, Neil Gaiman is just a perfect, flawless, and wonderful man, and I adore him. So I could have picked any book. And for personal preference, I might not. There are other books that I enjoyed just as much, if not more. But for being indicative of his style and the things that he can do and the way he works with mythology, it has to be American Gods. And then finally, which is where I'm going to throw in a little bit of love for Stephen King to counteract my earlier rather brusque remarks.
wait, were those on air or off air?
Those were on air, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to know whether or not. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and I wanted to throw Stephen King on here before I had to virtually lock it in to make up for that.
Before you threw him under a car? Wait,
but I threw on The Stand. I'm doing The Stand.
Okay.
Which, again, there's other novels that might come close to it. Like, it's a tough call for me between that and It. But I just reread The Stand. Like, I finished rereading it yesterday for probably the 8th time for a book club that I'm in. And so that's the one that's right there fresh in my memory. And I love Stephen King, and obviously I don't really wish he had died, but I do feel horribly betrayed by the end of Dark Tower. So that's my top 5.
All right, way to walk that one back.
Tie in.
No, kill him, murder, because that's how a Stephen King character would react, and I can't be that.
To tie in, did you know that it's getting The Stand is getting a reboot for an actual legitimate movie this time?
Yeah, I've heard that, and I enjoy the mini series for what it is.
Yeah,
it was fun and as well done as I think they could have really done at the time. But it could really use some updating to a more prestige format.
I don't know, man. I think the pinnacle of Stephen King.
Here's me, I'm gonna freak out.
What's that?
I said, if you Langoliers me, I'm gonna freak out.
How did you know?
Are you?
I was gonna say yes. The pinnacle of video adaptations of Stephen King's work, I think, is Langoliers, when you just have like Balky running across this late 90s, or running away from these late 90s demon Pac-Men.
They just stole and reskinned some cacodemons from Doom.
Yeah.
Not even Doom 2.
Just original.
Yeah, no, I did enjoy the Langoliers, actually.
Yeah, it was fine.
It was fun, and I really like Bronson Pinchot. He needs more work, because he's so ludicrous in everything that he does. But anyway, my list. All right, top 5 novels that I have read. First one is Story of the Stone by an author whose name I am about to brutalize, but I believe it's pronounced Cao Shui-Qin, and he was a 18th century Chinese novelist. He wrote about a period of time in Chinese history. It was a historical novel covering the 15th century. It has to do with this celestial who is given mortal form and is a member of this noble family. So it gets into a lot of the historical Chinese politics, a lot of the Taoist mysticism of the culture, and I read it way back in college as part of a world literature class, and its story stuck with me ever since. It's one of the reasons that I have actually enjoyed a lot of stuff loosely related to Chinese culture, and there's not a lot in the West that does true representations of Chinese culture. A lot of it is more cultural appropriation stuff, which, you know, there's a whole other topic there. But it's always, I'm glad that was like my first real deep exposure into this, and not, even though I love it, Big Trouble in Little China. But anyway, next book is Starship Troopers, Robert Heinlein. And I absolutely love the book. I absolutely love the movies, and they cover the same sort of topic, which is like jingoism run amok, but they do it in very different ways. The movies do it in more of a satirical way, and I would not satirical, more. I'm sorry, that reverse what I was going to say. The book does it in more of a satirical way, sort of the Swiftian satire. The movies do it in more of a boy, and I just had the word parody. A parody of it. Yeah. So this a small but important distinction there, and they're very different experiences. But I think they're both good. A lot of people that I knew that really enjoyed the novel didn't care for the movies. That would be a big rabbit trail for me to get into that. But just suffice to say, I enjoy them both, even though they approach it in different ways. Next, another one that could spark a conversation as far as movie adaptations, and that's Do Android Dream of the Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. Blade Runner is a really good adaptation in the re-release that came out about 15 years ago when Ridley Scott got his final director's cut of it. The
director's cut?
Yeah, the original version was not. I mean, that was more along the lines of Total Recall bad as far as adaptations of Dick work go. Dick's work goes. Dick work would be something else entirely. Anyway, moving along to another fella from New Wave sci-fi in the 70s, Mr. Roger Zelazny and Nine Princes in Amber. Excellent first 5 books of the series. I never really could get through the later 5 books, but Nine Princes in Amber is the very first book in the first section of the series. Absolutely stuff. Great world building. Buddhist robins that get eaten by cats and are reincarnated. Just amazing stuff. And then lastly, another not first in terms of publication date, but first in the chronology is Elric of Melniboné. Fantastic series. This, I guess you would consider it a prequel because it was written after the stories had already been established, but it covers how Elric finds the sword Stormbringer, which, you know, has been
his cursed root blade, and
and you know, it's possessed by a demon. It's basically the story of the Lich King, but it's done a lot better because it's not the Lich King. And yeah, fantastic read, fantastic years. And then when you deep dive into this whole Ultimate Champion cycle, and that he's just a reincarnation of this basically platonic ideal of the hero, and yeah, great stuff. Moorcock's fantastic. Elric of Melniboné, easily one of my favorites. So there you go. That is my top 5. So, all right, in the tradition of what we do here, we pick a top 5 of top 5s. And we had a little bit of overlap. So
obviously the Wheel of Time overlaps.
Yeah, Wheel of Time overlaps. So I think, well, how do you want to do this? You want to do, since pretty much everything, let's see, Starship Troopers and Do Android's Dream of Electric Sheep are the only 2 I had that weren't series.
Right.
Did you have any that weren't series?
It's one of those things that, honestly, American Gods is not technically in his series.
Yeah.
Although there was another book in the same universe, Anansi Boys. But American Gods and The Stand. But then The Stand ties into the Dark Tower. So, like, everything kind of ties into at least something else.
So let's do something a little bit different because of what we're doing here. Let's, out of our top 5 of top 5s, let's pick the top 5 series. So Wheel of Time, easily.
Amber.
Amber, okay, yeah, I'll say Amber for sure. I will say Name of the Wind. The Quoth series. Kingslayer series is what it's called?
Kingslayer Chronicles.
Kingslayer Chronicles,
yep. King Killer Chronicles.
King Killer Chronicles. I cannot accept having Seeker of Truth on this because it just
on that one. I realize that. If we don't include anything Discworld, I'm gonna be very
Discworld. Yeah, Discworld can go on the top 5.
Yeah, Discworld can.
And I'm gonna go with I'm gonna nominate Ultimate Champion, the entire cycle, not just the Elric series, but the cycle with the various incarnations.
I didn't really read anything beyond the Elric books.
I've read a few of them, and nothing really held up to me as well as Elric. Some of them were good, but I think just the whole idea that, you're talking about in sort of the massive world building of like the Stand and the Dark Tower and so on and so forth. But I really enjoyed that, and of course the Elric series can stand on its own as well. So
very much so.
So
yeah,
I'm. Yeah. All right. So I think we got our top 5 to top 5. All right. So that'll be it for this week's No Particular Order. Leave your top 5s in the comments or tell us why we shouldn't have picked or should have picked something that we didn't. And remember,
and obviously, we're going to put it in the caveat that there were certain books that we left off because we have already discussed them in previous episodes of various shows, like The Lord of the Rings and The Chronicles of Narnia and such like that.
Yeah. I would have left those off anyway.
Yeah, I would have felt weird.
I couldn't have.
Yeah.
Yeah, without that justification, ultimately, I have to put The Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit on there, minimum.
I suppose
if I don't discuss the entire series, and then Narnia.
Yeah, and the whole idea of these no particular orders is we try to avoid stuff that it's off the top of our head, and we try to avoid stuff that's like right on the nose too. Because
nobody wants to be the one when you're talking about music being like, well, what about the Beatles? You want to get like dig in deep and get like the deep cuts where like nobody's ever heard this album before, and so I'm super cool.
I mean,
we're all hipsters.
Not just the hipster thing, but I mean, nobody wants to watch a list show where people just like...
we're all not hipsters.
Yeah, you are.
No.
Oh, yeah, I am.
Oh, yeah, you are.
Except for now I'm not, because I just said I was a hipster, and you have, like, definitionally you have to deny being a hipster to be a hipster.
My head's gonna explode. All right, so
anyway,
before we dive too far down that particular rabbit hole, let's see. Go ahead and like, subscribe, and join us next week when our top 5 will be. I don't know what's our top 5 going to be next week.
Top 5 books we haven't read.
There we go. All right. Anything by Marcel Proust, number 1. All right, and thanks for joining, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye. So through the magic of technology from the intro to now, Jay has a headset.
Poof.
Poof.